Hello, and welcome back, or welcome if you're a first-time viewer. I'm glad that you are watching us here at Grace Community Church, and hope that we can continue to journey together in this way, and hopefully we'll here soon we will begin to have some people here in person again. And we are grateful for that. So for many of you might be familiar with the fact that this week I had the honor and privilege of having a recorded Zoom conversation with my friend William Paul Young, author of The Shack. And it's been a really cool experience of getting to know him and becoming friends with him over the years. And so I was grateful that he took time out of his day to spend some time with me in that fashion. And so one of the things that he said in there, and kind of told a story towards the end, and it really kind of coalesced with a lot of the things I was thinking about this week through my prayer time and my meditation time. And he told the story about a young pastor who had gone through some difficulties in his ministry, and kind of took a little retreat away and had taken a horse ride out in the middle of nowhere and then kind of clean up the language a little bit, but in the middle he saw there kind of a pile of horse poop, and out of it was a tomato plant that was growing, and there was a ripe tomato hanging on there. And when the guy got the tomato home and he washed it off, he heard God say, I can produce more fruit out of this horse poop than you can out of all the 10 years that you've been trying. And it really got me thinking, because the one verse that has really been in my mind, and like I said, I've been meditating on this verse a lot this week, comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. Jesus, talking to Paul, says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And that's something that, for me, I really needed to hear. My grace is sufficient for you. And how many of us have heard God say that in some way, shape, or form in our life? And I know I've heard it before, I've read it before. I know several years ago I preached my way through 2 Corinthians, so I know I've read it, I've talked about it, I've preached about it. But do I believe it? And this is something that I've wrestled with a lot, is there's a lot of things that I know, but knowledge doesn't equal belief. And so I'll talk a lot about, theology, dispensational theology. I know dispensational theology, but the problem is I never believed it. I can know that God's grace is sufficient, but do I believe it? And so when we think back about all of the striving that we've done, all the control that we have tried to gain, all the things that we have tried to make happen, is it because we don't believe that His grace is sufficient? That in our weakness, His power will be perfected? Because after Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness, Paul then says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Excuse me. How many of us are confident boasting in our weakness? How many of us are confident in admitting our weakness, showing weakness? This goes against everything we've ever been taught, especially in a masculine context. You cannot show weakness. You cannot be weak. You cannot be seen as weak. You got to be strong. Portray yourself as strong because you, the people around you, need to know that you are strong. And that you can achieve and you can accomplish and you can be in control. Because as Christians, we know that God's grace is sufficient. But do we believe it? Are we willing to give up control? Are we willing to listen to the psalmists when they say in Psalm 46:10, cease striving and know that I am God. We can portray all the strength we want. We can try to build huge buildings. We can build huge corporations. We can have huge followings. And we can have all the control. But do we believe that His grace is sufficient? And we can achieve all of these things, but yet God will produce more fruit out of a pile of horse crap than He can out of anything we can do. So why are we trying so hard to do it? Why are we trying so hard to build it? Why are we trying so hard to be in control? And recognize that His grace is sufficient. That His power is perfected in our weakness. That when we give up the reins of control, when we stop trying to manipulate, when we stop trying to build, when we stop striving and we are just still, because once again, I know most of our Bibles translate Psalm 46:10 as be still and know that I am God. New American Standard says cease striving and know that I am God. And we need to cease striving so we can be still. And we need to stop trying so hard. And we just need to allow His power, His grace to be enough. This doesn't mean that we just sit on the sidelines and wait for God to show up and do everything. What it means is we get out of His way inside of ourselves. Because once again, where is He? He's in me, the hope of glory. But I don't let Him operate in me. I don't let Him have control of me. Because I don't believe His grace is sufficient. I know His grace is sufficient, but I don't believe His grace is sufficient. So I keep building. I keep being in control. Instead of getting out of His way and allowing Him to work through me. Allowing Him to work through you. Allowing Him to work through us. Because Jesus Christ can accomplish more working through us than we can ever accomplish working for Him. It's His power that is perfected. When we admit our weakness, when we admit, I have no control. I am not in control. I cannot climb this mountain. I cannot overcome this obstacle. When we admit those weaknesses, we then begin to believe that His grace is sufficient because He can achieve those things for us. He can overcome those obstacles. He can move the mountains out of our way. But it takes us realizing the biggest thing holding us back from God achieving His full glory is us trying to be in control of it. One of the things Richard Rohr says, he says, so much of the Christian journey, so much of what we call deep spirituality is about letting go. Letting go of our hatred. Letting go of the lies we've been told, letting go of our insecurities, letting go of our vulnerabilities, letting go of the control. And I know a lot of us have been through things that traumatized us. We've been through things that scarred us. And to stop that from ever happening again, once we were able to, we grabbed a hold of control of our lives. And now we are in control because we're never going to allow an abandonment to happen. We're never going to allow that abuse to happen. We're never going to allow that trauma to happen. And as long as I'm in control, I can control what comes in and comes out. And I will never allow that to happen to me again because I am in control. I know that mindset. I've carried that mindset with me for many years. Because I didn't believe God's grace was sufficient. I didn't believe that in my weakness, His power would be perfected. We need to boast more gladly of our weaknesses. We need to boast more gladly of our vulnerabilities. We need to give up control and realize that God will accomplish far more working through us than we can ever accomplish on our own. You know, I've had the privilege and honor of helping a lot of people through a lot of very difficult, trying times. And people often will ask me, man, how are you so good at this? How do you always know what to say? My response is always the same. When I'm counseling somebody, all I do is get out of the way and allow the Holy Spirit to work through me, to speak through me. It's not me. I don't have any training. I don't have any extensive gifts. But then there's so many other areas of my life where I don't allow that to happen. I don't allow myself to get out of the way. I don't allow myself to give up control. Even though I see that in some ways, when I do those, amazing things happen. So we need to do is we need to spend some time allowing this phrase to wash over us. My grace is sufficient for you. My grace is sufficient for you. That's all we need. It's God's grace. He's trying to heal all of the wounds. We don't have to heal our wounds. He's healing them. We don't have to achieve greatness. He's going to achieve greatness. And He can achieve more through a pile of horse crap than we could ever achieve through all of our striving, all of our controlling. All we got to do is just get out of the way. Let Him work. So when I talk about peacemaking, talk about being a peacemaker, it's about letting go. It's about realizing we cannot control the outcome of anything. All we have to do is just let go of our positions, let go of our thoughts, let go of our beliefs, and just be. The things I've been wrestling with lately is, I always say that there's two longing questions that have plagued me my entire life. Is who am I? And why am I here? And who am I? I am a child of God. But in order to be called a child of God, I got to be a peacemaker. There's all this stuff. Now I'm trying to think about, okay, what does it take to be God's child instead of just being God's child? I'm trying to gain information. I'm trying to gain information and or knowledge about what it is to be God's child instead of just being God's child. I'm trying to spend all this time trying to figure out how to be a peacemaker instead of just being a peacemaker. How am I going to do this in the future instead of just doing it now? Being present in the moment, making peace with my weaknesses, making peace with my past, making peace with my thoughts, making peace with the lies that I've been told. And I can make peace with all of that. Why? Because God's grace is sufficient for me. God's grace is sufficient for me. And that is the hope. That is the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. That is the hope that we have in the cross. Because on the cross, Jesus Christ says, once again, not verbatim, you're going to find this in the scriptures. But while hanging on the cross, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. This is all you need, is me. And the resurrection, him coming back 3 days later and saying, see, I'm still with you. I'm still for you. I'm still in you. My grace will always be sufficient, even in my death, and especially in my resurrection. My grace is sufficient. Let me be in control. Let me be in charge. Let me do the work. You be the hands. You be the feet. You be the mechanism in which I use. A lot of times we talk about tools, that we should be God's tools. That doesn't work for me. Because I have tools. I use tools. But I don't have a relationship with my tools. I'm not God's tool. God has a relationship with me. But I am the mechanism which he's going to use to do the work. So we're in relationship. There's an intimacy that exists between us and God, us and Christ in us. There's something more than just being used for God's glory. That was a little bit off subject, but that's just where my mind goes sometimes. So I want us to spend some time this week taking some time out. I want you to get into a comfortable position, comfortable chair, laying down, however you can get comfortable. I want you to take 3 deep breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just calm yourself. Clear your mind. Allow the thoughts to come and allow the thoughts to go. Focus on the rise and the fall of your breath. And I want you to say, your grace is sufficient for me. Inhale, your grace. Exhale, is sufficient for me. And just do that. 5 minutes. Eyes may be open, eyes may be closed, but just meditate on the fact that God's grace is sufficient for you. So we can move past knowing it and move into believing it. Because once we begin to believe it, we'll start letting go. We'll start relinquishing control. I'm not saying any of this because I've done it. I'm not saying any of this because I'm trying to tell you what to do, because it's what I did and I know and I'm smarter than everybody. This is where I'm at. This is the journey that I'm beginning. I don't want to go on it alone. I want you to come with me. I want us to journey together into God's grace. I want us to journey together into our vulnerabilities. Journey out of our insecurities. So once again, once we leave our insecurities, then we can become vulnerable. Being vulnerable is courageous. You ever listen to Brené Brown? I want us to take this journey together. Because we want to change our world. Our world right now is so desperate for change. We've been doing the same thing after generation after generation after generation, and we keep expecting it to give us a different result. It's time for us to change the world. We just need to give up control and allow God to work. Because once again, He's trying to change the world. He's trying to bring the world back into unity, into oneness. He's trying to bring the world back into peace, but He can't do it without us, and He can't do it if we keep getting in His way, trying to control everything. Trying to control who wins an election, or trying to control who wins an argument, or trying to control this or control that. Let's let Him be in control. Let's move away from the duality of good and evil. Let's move back into oneness, back into unity. Because His grace is sufficient. And it's in our weakness that His power will be perfected. Amen.